Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the least important recording projects ever. And today's exemplar, and it is an exemplar, is the complete Beethoven piano sonatas by Rudolf Buchbinder, live at the Salzburg Festival on Deutsche Grammophon. Now, why is this one of the least important recording projects ever? I mean, Beethoven piano sonatas or the pianist's New Testament. You would think that an artist of this august wisdom and magnitude, well, somewhat magnitude, diminitude. He's not as magna as some of the others, but he's pretty magna as far as magnitude goes. Would be like, you'd think it would be a big deal, a really big deal. His testament, right? Like the New Testament, the Old Testament, it's a testament. Well, yes, it would be were it not for the fact that this is his third recording of the complete Beethoven sonatas, all in luscious stereo, all for major labels. The first was for Teldec, or Telefunken in those days, and it came with this wonderful disc I just talked about, Diabelli's Waltz. This was part of it because he also did Beethoven's variations and other things. And this project was marvelous and imaginative, and it made a wonderful sort of greeting card or introduction to Buchbinder's view of the Beethoven sonatas, which was a very poised, classical, sharply focused, somewhat spiky, and I thought really, really bracing and fresh version. Very, very, very fine. Then he redid them. He redid them for RCA. And those are also quite good, and they're different. All of these are different. We're not talking about, remember, this series is not about whether something is good. It's whether it's important. And Buchbinder was always a good Beethoven player, no matter what he was doing, right? So the RCA one has differences in interpretive viewpoint. It certainly does, and you can hear them quite audibly. And this one is more differenter still than the original one. The more differences, the differences are questions of more flexibility in tempo, I think, more legato in terms of phrasing, a less forcefully accented approach in some respects, more emphasis on the singing line. It's lovely Beethoven playing. It's also, of course, very different sonically because it's live and it's in a swimmier acoustic than the rather dry sonics favored on his previous two cycles. So you can talk about all of those things. Now, this was reviewed very, very comprehensively by ClassicsToday.com's own Jed Disler. And if you're an insider, you can go and have a look at that review and listen to some sound samples compared with other Buchbinder Beethoven sonata cycles or the same works. And here's the point. Now, here's the point which makes it really, really less important, in my view anyway. As Jed points out, it's a very good cycle. It does have differences. If we like Buchbinder, those differences could be called insights. If we don't like Buchbinder, those differences could be called mannerisms or random doodlings. It all depends on your own personal taste, right? And whether you like it. But here's the issue. Why do we need 3 Beethoven piano sonata cycles from the same guy? Why? What's the point? Now, Buchbinder is not the only guilty party here, right? Many others have also done Beethoven piano sonata cycles multiple times. Barenboim's done them a few times. Brendel did them a couple times. Claudio Rau did them a couple times. Plus, it's not that you can't keep returning to the same music. It's what is the point of returning to the same music? Do these people really think that they are so insightful that every single time they change the phrasing of a melody or they change the tempo of a movement or section, it matters? It really matters? It's going to tell us something astonishing and marvelous? I mean, sometimes it will and sometimes it won't, right? But most of the time, it won't. 99.9% of the time, he's just doing the same thing all over again, maybe a little bit differently. And, when there are two ways to address something like this as a critic. Jed does it one way, which I think is a very, very smart thing for him to do, because Buchbinder is essentially competing with himself. So the review, the context of Jed's review, which again I recommend if you're an insider that you read, is that this needs to be compared to his prior two cycles to see what the differences are. That's just logical. That's all we have time to do within the context of the fact that he's a very, very good Beethoven pianist. And so we're going to get a good cycle, no matter what. It's going to be a good cycle, no matter what, his changes of opinion or changes in attitude towards certain works are not going to result in anything grotesque. There are no abominations here. So that's okay, right? But at the same token, the other way to do it, and the context in which I'm speaking from, for the purposes of this particular video, is not Buchbinder competing with himself. It's Buchbinder competing with everybody else who's ever done a Beethoven sonata cycle, sometimes multiple Beethoven sonata cycles. He always stacked up well because he's a fine pianist. But 3 Buchbinder Beethoven cycles out there in the world where there are dozens, or might I say hundreds, of complete Beethoven piano cycles, how important can that be? It would be one thing if Buchbinder had been playing Beethoven all of his life and he decided, okay, I'm an elder statesman of the keyboard, and as an elder statesman, I am going to set down for posterity my final thoughts on these works, which I've been playing all my life. And maybe you could say, well, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I felt very differently in that Teldec cycle, and so I did these. And okay, so we can compare this to the Teldec cycle 40 years ago and see how he's matured or deepened or shallowed or whatever his interpretations. Okay, I can buy that. And we could compare it to other Beethoven cycles and other choices that we have out there. But then there's that RCA cycle in the middle. And all this does, in my personal opinion, is cast aspersions on his previous work. Is he turning his back on it? Is he disregarding it? Is he saying, this is no longer legitimate? This is no longer representative of my feelings? Is he saying that all of you people who spent all that money buying his previous Beethoven sonata cycle or cycles, you were all fools? I was putting one over on you? This is the real deal? Or is he going to say, oh, well, this is just how I felt on the day, and maybe tomorrow I'll do it differently. And it doesn't mean that my prior thoughts were irrelevant or uninteresting. It just means that I do it differently now. Well, see, I don't buy that. I actually believe that when an artist makes a recording, they're making a statement, and it's a statement that should be as close to permanent as they're willing to let it be. And that may be naive of me, but I feel that people have limited resources and they have a right to believe that when an artist decides to make a recording, he has something to say that he's going to stand by for the foreseeable future. And if he says to us, well, those other versions were just as great because I'm great and everything I do is great and it doesn't matter what the differences in greatnesses are. It's like comparing different infinities. They're all infinite, but they're different. No, I don't buy that. I think that's just unbelievable arrogance and narcissism, and I'm not accusing him of that. I don't know if that's what he would say. But, that's one answer to why you should be collecting 3 Buchbinder Beethoven piano sonata cycles. So we're talking, remember, about importance, not how good it is. It's very good. Jed believed it was very good. I've heard it. I think it's very good. I have the other 2. They're very good also. But important? Nah. I mean, you could live without this so easily. And because there's so many other options, so many other choices, not least his own. I find this to be just the acme of pointlessness. So there you go. One of the least recording projects ever. Jazz hands. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.